Just like that. Okay.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back. Again, this is day 2 of the Black Women Photographers Summit, and we're here with our very special guest. I'm your host, Chrissy. I'm a portrait photographer based in LA, and this is Carrie.
Hi, everyone.
Oh my God, it's so good to see you. You literally look like a ray of sunshine. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm doing great today. I'm really doing good. The weather's not great, but I'm so happy to be talking to you guys. I'm on a high. This is great.
Yes. Where are you based?
In Montreal, Canada.
Lovely. Okay, so
Hmm.
I want to get into like all the details of your creative journey and your life. So I would like to start actually maybe somewhere in the middle because I heard that before you were a photographer, you were working 9 to 5 as an engineer. Is that
I
right?
sure was. I sure was. So I studied industrial engineering at Concordia University here. I was always kind of good in math. And I also am, the only daughter of an immigrant. So, there's a lot of pressure to really, I think, succeed in a way. I mean, you can measure success any which way, but for an immigrant mother, having an engineer seat felt like success. So I
Right.
worked as an engineer for a good while, and I liked it, but I think that I was missing the creative part of my life.
Mm.
It felt very um calculated and very straightforward, and I think I needed a little bit more whimsy in my life.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. So then it sounds like then you were probably always a creative kid. When
Yeah.
did you decide to make that pivot in your career? Because I'm sure that was like very brave of you.
That was a tough one. So I was the kid who did, I took sewing classes, I did the jewelry making, I was doing pottery. I was always looking for creative avenues.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I took photography when I was in high school. But it was analog. And I'd sort of, forgotten about it. And I was traveling a lot for work. So I couldn't even really at some point take classes, sit down and say, okay, I'm going to take a night class in something. And it just wasn't possible. And so
Yeah.
what happened is I lost my job. And there was a class given in one of the parks near my house. And, it was once a night, it was 3 hours, once a week. And I thought, you know what? I'm free. I can actually go in. And it was, I don't know how to explain it. It was like magic operated all over again. And I was like, oh, I love this. I
Yeah.
love this. Oh yeah. And I started taking more and more pictures and I realized, you know what? I think I would really enjoy doing this. And so I started taking contracts here and there. But then because I had 2 kids, I was like, I can't really afford to sort of, go off on a whimsy and decide that I want to be a photographer. So I went back to work.
Okay.
And then at some point before the pandemic, I lost my job again. And I'd
Hmm.
already started taking classes and whatnot. And I met with someone and she said, what if you gave this photography thing a try? And I was like, well, no.
Like, girl, are you being rational?
What are you saying here? And then, um, and she said, but you know what? She's like, you can try it. And if it doesn't work out, whatever you've known is still going to be there. It's not like, you're going to do this thing and, you're going to lose everything. And I thought, I think she's right. I really think that I should give it a go. And then what happened is the pandemic started
Mm.
and it was just, I think, life affirming for me in a way because it really pushed me to say, what if you only have, 3 months, 6 months, who knows? Because I remember the beginning of the pandemic was so scary. And I was like,
Yeah.
do you not want to try something? Do you want to keep going, regretting taking that chance? And I thought, yeah, I think I need to do this. And so here we are.
Well, first of all, shout out to this person. Do you want to tell us their name? Because what a light. They like encouraged you so much. That's so beautiful.
I think Her name is Régine Tardieu, and she was so pivotal for me because I think it's sometimes what happens, you have these internal monologues. And so
Yeah.
but the problem is you're sort of going around in circles because you're only hearing your own voice, right? And the beauty of talking to somebody is that they can give you another path that you may not have envisioned prior to that. And
Yeah.
she was the one that said, when I heard her say that, I thought, yeah. And she's like, you could work anywhere. It doesn't matter. And I thought, I think it makes sense. So yes, thank you to Regine. She was encouraging and wonderful and just awesome. Yeah,
Let us all aspire to be that person in somebody else's life.
absolutely.
Because taking the leap to be a freelance photographer is scary,
Yes.
especially coming from such stability of like, I'm an engineer. I can probably get a job at any point, even after losing a job. Like the idea that there would be scarcity for engineers is like, that's the whole reason why an immigrant parent or any parent for that matter would be like, you should be an engineer, a doctor, a
Yes.
lawyer,
A lawyer.
these are things that are always needed. Um,
Yes.
so let's talk about like that leap that you took then. So
Mm-hmm.
you lose your job from the 9 to 5 and you
Yes.
enter into freelancing. What are things that you learned that you wish you would have knew like from the beginning that might help a photographer right now? And while you do that, I'm actually going to pull up some of your work so the girls can
Okay.
say,
So you're asking me if somebody else was starting out from scratch, what steps should they take? Is that the question?
yeah, some tips or some just things that worked for you.
Okay. So one of the first things that I did was approach a local photographer that whose work I'd been admiring for quite some time.
Mhm.
And I reached out to him and I said, you know, are you looking for an assistant? And he said, well, I already have one. But he's like, I'm always looking for fire talent. And I thought, okay, I might not have fire talent right now, but I'm definitely interested in learning. And he was so welcoming and so generous. And I think that what I've learned is that there are many people that are going to be along the way that are going to help you. You may not realize, and you may be too afraid to ask,
Mm,
but people can be so generous. And if you're not afraid of hearing the word no, there's so much to gain from reaching out to those people. So I would say, don't be afraid to ask. That would be lesson number one. Lesson number two would be do things while you're scared,
mhm,
because you sometimes think I need for things to sort of be stable before I can do anything. If I don't do it that way, it's not going to work out. But the world is constantly shifting, and you have no choice but to sort of shift with it. And you have to get comfortable with that. And I think it's okay. It's okay to be scared. It's normal to be scared. It usually means that you're excited about something new. And I think it's a sign to go for it. And people will support you. Even if you think you're alone in this journey, you're really not. I would say reach out, reach out to people. Don't be afraid to do that.
yeah, I think that's really sound advice. Um, when trying something new, we get caught up in our fears of like
Hmm.
the rejection of hearing no, and like you mentioned, just being scared to ask people for help
Yeah.
because you're afraid that they won't be generous. And I feel like I've personally also gained so much from just asking people for help. What do you think helped you during the pandemic when you were making this big transition?
Um, Well, I think I don't know if you want to pull up some of the portraits that I took. So during the pandemic, I was sitting at home, basically, washing all the fruit and veggies,
Right.
just basically by the door, just waiting and nervous. And I remember my husband going, the virus is not waiting outside the door for you, waiting to jump on you. It's okay. And so I started seeing images of, these Black women who were working in healthcare. There's a lot of people in healthcare in my surrounding. And I look at the news and they weren't there.
Mm.
And, the few times they would go into the hospital, I would see them, nobody was talking to them. And I was struck by that because, you know, there are so many immigrant women that I know that work in a hospital setting and they were never being interviewed. And on the off chance that they were being interviewed, it was really more, they were talking about people who had just arrived, who had a precarious status. And I was like, I know people that are head of departments. I know doctors. I know all kinds of things. Why are we only showing the ones that are um, in a precarious situation? And so it got me during the pandemic to start saying, I need to be documenting these women. I
Mhm.
need to be sharing their experiences because I thought if I'm not doing it, who will? And
Yeah.
so with that in mind, I started taking the portraits of the women in my backyard.
Would that
And
be under projects? I would love to show a
yeah,
photo.
that would be under projects.
Gotcha.
And yes. And so, I sort of reached out to a whole bunch of people and said, if you're a Black woman in healthcare, or if you know one, have them reach out to me. I'd love to take their portraits. So a lot of them are taken in the backyard. And they were, for me, so brave because in a time when I was afraid, they were afraid, but they were still doing it.
Yeah.
You know, they were still getting up every morning. Some of them had to, have their kids babysat by other people just because we didn't know how it was transmitted. And I found their strength and fortitude so powerful. And I thought, I want people to start seeing these faces as well.
Yeah. I love that. That's so powerful.
It moved me. I'm sorry, I sort of get emotional when I talk about this because so when I sent out that email to people, so many people said, we work and nobody acknowledges us.
Mm.
We're not at the forefront of anybody's mind. And we sort of feel afraid, but we're still working. I was talking to women who'd lost so many of their own patients.
Wow.
Um, but they were still showing up. That woman that you see right there, she used to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go to a retirement home. And she said she lost so many patients on her floor. And so she was grieving these women, but still showing up for them. And I
Mm.
found that to be so beautiful. And so many said, nobody's looked at us in that way before. And that's when I realized that I think your camera can be very powerful.
Yeah, that was a gift. Like you gave these women a gift. And it's not lost on me that like most nurses are women. And
Mhm.
I'm even just grateful myself that you also chose Black women because Black women every day during the pandemic were putting themselves out there.
Yes.
Um, and so like this just it immortalizes them during a time where we all felt very mortal.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And I think, we're always, I thought, if I'm not documenting this, in 50 years, will people remember that we were part of the effort, that we were there, that we were on the front lines? Will their contributions be erased? And it
Yeah.
felt important that I be able to capture that. And so I asked them to show up. I told them, wear something that you would wear to go to work, and then wear something that makes you feel beautiful. And
Yeah.
they showed up for me.
I love that that was a prompt. And these were published, right?
Yeah, they were.
How
So
did that feel? How did that go?
it was insane because I was taking these pictures and posting them on Instagram. And one day, this woman said to me, I'm going to start sharing them. People were sharing them. And she said, I know somebody who works in one of the local newsrooms. I'll reach out to him and I'll let him know. And I thought, okay, well, that would be nice. They did reach out and they made this article in their on their website, and then the TV called, and so I got to be on the news, and then so I live in Montreal, Quebec, and they were going to do a report locally, and it went really well. And then so the lady said to me, she said, I have good news and I have bad news. So we're supposed to do the on air report. It was going to be on at 6 o'clock. And she said, they've pushed it back to 10 o'clock. But now instead of just being for Quebec, it's going to be national. So it's really going to be coast to coast. I was like, excuse me?
Oh my God.
Talking about. And she's like, yeah, are you comfortable? Yes, I'm comfortable with that.
Right. Yes. That's incredible.
And so it was national, and then it played again in the morning. And I was getting such beautiful emails from these women across Canada saying, thank you for seeing us.
Mm.
Thank you for appreciating our sacrifice. I feel seen. I'm telling you, I broke down. Most of the emails just made me cry
Of course.
because I think it was an acknowledgement in a country that's very, homogenous in a way, that we exist and we're important and we matter.
Yeah. And I mean, as an artist, this is you doing something too, where it's like
Yes.
people needed to see this. Their calling is to work in healthcare,
Hmm.
and with that, their initiative was to do something and to help people.
Hmm.
And it sounds like your calling and your initiative as a photographer is to let people know who these people are, what they
Yes.
look, and who they help. And I don't know, like that's just like it's sitting in my heart so big right now. Like this is so beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And so I think, especially when I started the project, I think we were talking a little bit about how I started. So I was, I think, relatively new to photography. And I kept telling myself, I'm not ready. I'm not good enough. The portraits are not, I'm not a portraitist. It's not going to work out. But I realized again that I'm scared, but I still need to do this. I feel like it's important. And I think things just settle in. And maybe the first shots are not great. But then as I got more comfortable, I think that I felt more and more at ease. And I felt I was answering to a bigger purpose. And so it was worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I just also want to call out in the chat, Phyllis says your work is beautiful.
Thank you.
And I mean, I guess it is a little early for a Q&A, but since they put it in the same comment, it says, what body and lens kit do you use?
I have the most basic camera. I have a Canon uh 5D Mark II.
Mm-hmm.
And the lens I was using at the time was fifth Sigma 50 millimeter 1.4.
Oh, that girl. The Canon 5D series is so amazing.
I
And
love it.
I also use 5D. Um,
Hmm.
and yeah, you can never go wrong with that. 50, the nifty 50, they don't call it that for no reason.
Exactly.
Okay, so I also want to talk about what maybe you might define as like a breakthrough moment also. I remember when Black women photographers did this collab with NASDAQ.
Yes. Oh my God.
Wondering if you could share a little bit about that.
You know what? Black women photographers, I have to say, is one of the, there's so many things I could say about Black women photographers, but I will say this. Holly created a movement and she showed so many of us what was possible.
Mhm.
Because you might be at home by yourself in a small town and thinking, maybe I'm the only one. Does anybody else do this? Who else can relate to me? And so when I found Black women photographers, I was like, these are my people.
Yeah.
And she reached out and she said, they would like to feature you. I was like, what? Who am I? What do you mean they want to talk to me? And she was like, yes, they want to talk to you. Do you want to take a moment? And that, I think, changed for me the perception of also what was possible. Being featured, doing the interview, and being able to speak about my vision about photography made me feel like I was part of a collective and
Yeah.
that my voice somehow mattered. It really moved me to be able to do that. I was floored.
And does matter.
It does. It does. Everyone brings something, I think, so different to photography, so beautiful. And all our voices sort of enrich photography. And it's such a blessing to be able to see all these other women who bring their own point of view and to have that opportunity, let's say for NASDAQ to say, hey, you know what? I'm interested in what you have to say, and to be able to say it felt amazing. But it reminded me that I'm part of something bigger than myself. And that felt amazing.
Yeah. I'm curious, like, I mean, I know, through doing this work that our confidence grows and
Mhm.
we switch something in our aura switches from like, oh, you want to talk to me to to like, yes, I deserve to be here.
Yes.
Do you remember that turning point for you when you were like, okay, actually, I deserve to be here. I deserved this moment, this space.
Oh, that's a great question. I think that, hmm, when did I realize that? I think that once okay, one of the local papers was doing this, because I'd always wanted to do documentary. Documentary felt important to me because, again, I wanted for people to be able to see the people that I live amongst. I live in a very it's a tough neighborhood, or it's perceived as such, and I wanted people to be able to see the people that look like me who live
Yeah.
here. And so when the local paper they were looking for interns, and I thought to myself, okay, I won't apply because this has nothing to do with me. And a friend reached out and said, no, 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 this is for you. When I was picked, I think it changed everything about the way that I perceived myself, because I felt like I'd gone up with probably some of the best photographers in the area, certainly.
Yeah.
And for them to look at my work and say, we want to have you on board, I think it really changed everything for me. And I think it changed people's perception of me as well, because every day in the paper, they would see a new image that I'd created. And I think that it made them feel and me feel like, yeah, you know what I have to say, what I'm bringing to the table is worthwhile.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. I guess sometimes it just sounds cliche because you hear these kind of things often, but like having that community, that support can really help ground you essentially in being
Mm-hmm.
and knowing your worth. I think that's really what it is. It's like knowing your worth and feeling comfortable in sharing your worth with people.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, because you know and I know I'm not trying to plug Black women photographers, but I think they're really, nobody's asked me to do that, but I have to say it because I think it's important. Because the opportunities that are afforded to you by being in the group are so vast and so important.
Yeah.
Whether it be the portfolio reviews, whether it be, the grants that are being offered, whether it's letting you know about these different opportunities, they make you realize that it's a vast world. There are many ways where you can fit in. And I don't think I would have been able to do all of that without that network and
Yeah.
without other women also being, I'm in the same boat. I'm curious. I don't know about this. Da da da. Can you help me? Being on the Slack with other people, it makes you realize that you are grounded in something. And because your roots are firm, you can really continue to grow and reach out and do many more things because you have like this solid foundation that you're rooted in. And that was, you know, a turning point for me, I think.
Yeah, I love it. Shout out to Black women photographers. We stand Black women photographers. And I'm gonna shout out Helen in the chat who says, that's very true. It pushed me to pursue photography more seriously. Shout out to Polly. We love Polly.
Holly.
Which, that's a reminder, Black women photographers' birthday is coming up next month. So y'all can imagine there might be some surprises coming.
I hope so, as there
Right.
should be.
You know? Okay, so you mentioned how honestly it sounds like how documentary photography found you as a niche.
Mhm.
It sounds like you were just very inspired by the people around you,
Yes.
and wanting to tell the story about the people around you and yourself, really. But what about being a fine artist? That's funny. This
Mm,
artist.
yeah.
How'd you find yourself in that field?
Um, that's a good question. I think I wanted to, because documentary for me feels very straightforward. It isn't really, but in a way it can be because you're just trying to speak to the truth of a situation.
Yeah.
Uh, but fine art feels more intimate for me. It feels more um personal. And I think I wanted to be able to show that part of myself. You know, the same way I wanted to be able to document things as they are, I want to be able to show things that are smaller, a little bit more whimsical in some ways. And so when I started shooting, it felt important to me to be able to do that in a fine art sense because I wanted my work to speak to different people.
Yeah.
Um, and so a lot of it is really just, I feel like it's my soul coming through when in some of the fine art stuff that I do.
Yes. And then like, could you tell people how you even can get into fine art? Like, is there something you had to follow? Is there something you read? Like, how does one even go towards fine art?
I think that you really just, you have to find the thing that speaks to you, that matters to you, and that you want to show the world. And it's the kind of work that, you have to, I think, reach out to different people. Like I've reached out to museums, sometimes with success, sometimes not so much, to different artists. I was following um I was following some museums. I was following like some curators also. I've been to galleries, and it's just about trying to pitch your work. And I think it's finding that first person that says yes, that
Yeah.
opens the door to other opportunities. And the other thing I like to tell people is a no is part of photography, and you have to accept that. You know, it's the kind of doing photography is the kind of work where you will get rejected a lot.
Yeah.
But you know what? Understand that it's not quote unquote personal. It's really about showing your work to as many people as you can and finding the people that it resonates with and being able to pursue the a line of communication with those people. And so for me, fine art is the closest I feel I get to who I really am.
Hmm.
Yeah,
That's so
because I'm not,
special.
sorry?
That's so special.
Yeah, because I'm not thinking about anybody else. I'm not thinking about, what does somebody want or not want? I'm really thinking about what am I looking to show people. No, how am I? No, that's not correct. How am I showing up for other people in that the thing that I've decided to focus my lens on is the truest expression of who I am.
Mm.
And I think that's what fine art feels like to me.
That's beautiful. It has me wondering about how you can find that feeling or maintain that feeling that might be
Mm,
more accurate when you're working on commissions. So I see you have a commissions tab, and I would love if maybe you could point me to one and
sure.
just kind
Okay.
of like walk us through that.
Yeah.
Maybe some of
So,
your favorites, like how it went well for you.
okay. Let me open the website and then that way
Yeah, I'll share
we're
my screen.
we're looking at the same thing at the same time. Hold on. Okay. So I think the one that okay, la thérapie par les cheveux. So the one that is okay. Well, there are two. Oh my God, my favorite.
The work is that good. It's like all
No,
of them
it's
are
just,
favorite.
you know what? Okay, let's do Black History month calendar.
Okay.
Okay, so every year, I think it's in Montreal. They have a Black History Month calendar and they pick a different photographer to do it. And so this year the laureates were essentially like artists. And the theme at the time was I think know the past to inspire the future.
Okay.
And I loved it because I got people to show up as their authentic selves in front of the camera. I spent, oh my God, maybe a good 8 hours in total with the different laureates. And it was such a beautiful moment of bonding with me for me with them. When the group reached out to me, I was like, I don't know if I'm always questioning myself. Am I ready? Can I do this? And I thought, you know what? I really can do this. And the people showed up. They showed up and they wanted to be a part of the calendar. They wanted to be shown in their best light. They were absolutely wonderful. And I think to date is probably my favorite shoot ever, just
Mm.
because I don't know, like they wanted magic. And I feel like we wanted the same thing.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Yeah, some of these images feel like filled with wonder. Some of them feel super soft, like the one
Mhm.
gentleman. This is absolutely gorgeous. He looks so smart and calm and comfortable with
He's
you.
so wonderful. And that's
He,
the thing. Everybody's personality got to shine through.
yeah, yeah, this was really, really awesome. Can you talk to us a little bit about lighting too? Like, as a portrait photographer, I noticed you have both, where some, at least they look in studio to me, and then others that are natural light. Do you have a preference?
Uh,
And how do you
I'm
go?
going to tell you, I would rather, I'm always a fan of natural light, but that's just because it's probably to be honest, it's probably the easiest. And I think that I don't, just because I do a lot of, I think documentary, I don't like for things to be too fussy. And so I feel like with natural light, I can do it anywhere. I can set up anywhere. I don't have any constraints in terms of time, finding the studio, sometimes finding an assistant. That makes it easier for me. And
Yeah,
so I love natural light. And because as the day goes on, the light changes. And I find that it's so beautiful. You know, the midday light is one thing, afternoon light feels very different. And I love all the iterations of it. That's probably my favorite. And I do studio, I think more rarely. Um, and don't ask me any setup questions. I'm very basic. I know how to turn on the light. I know how to make it sync. Okay. And I get to get people to pose. But in terms of, like equipment, there are much better people than me to answer those questions.
yeah. I mean, I'm definitely of the notion that like your best tools are the ones that you have, and I love when I meet photographers who aren't crazy about technicalities or anything,
Yeah.
because to me it just feels like true artistry. It's like, babe, I don't know the name of this light. I just turned it on and put it where I thought was best, and I created this gorgeous image. And I'm like, yes, because really, like, how much does it matter if you know the name brand of this and
Yes.
the full name of that? Like,
Yes.
it's about being an artist and following your vision.
Yes. And I would say that a lot of the photographers, like I'm thinking about the Wood Bay, I'm thinking about the Wood Bay, I think Vivian Mayer. There are a lot of artists whose work I've loved who haven't necessarily been in studio. And I think that that's given me the courage to continue with natural light just because I think it's truer to the way that I naturally shoot,
Yeah.
you
And
know?
I think you do an incredible job at like capturing people's essence. Like this woman looks absolutely amazing. Could you talk to us about how you approach that? Like, how do you make people comfortable? And while you do that, I'll open up another commission. Is that okay?
Sure. Um, I love Dans l'Atelier.
Is that this one?
Oh, this one is great too. I love that one too. Um, so to make people comfortable, I think that I'm really interested in people. I'm one of those people, I like meeting new people. I think everybody has an interesting story to tell. I'm always surprised and taken aback by the most randomest of conversation I'll have with somebody I just met. And I think that that comes through. And I think that's part of the reason why people feel comfortable. A lot of the times I'll have shoots with people they'll start out and tell me, I hate taking pictures. I'm not comfortable. I feel nervous. And by the end, they're like, this was so great. I had such a great time. Because I feel there should be a lightness for me. There should be a lightness when we're taking pictures. It's supposed to be a moment that's shared. I'm not looking to coerce people into situations or positions that they're not comfortable with. I want people to be able to show up as themselves. I'll give them prompts here or there. How do you want to sit? Does this feel comfortable to you? Do you want to look this way? And at every step, I'm checking in with them to say, is this something that you're comfortable with? Because for me, we're crafting the picture together. And for me to be able to do that, I need to be able to have their input. And so I'm always sort of going back towards them to say, hey, how does that feel for you? What do you think if we do this? Let's try this. And so I'm always sort of looking to have their authorization in a sense. And I
Yeah.
think that's how I get people to be themselves in front of the camera. And the other thing I like to say is that I I take my work seriously, but I don't take myself seriously.
Mm.
If I think that cracking a joke is going to help, I'm going to make that joke, you know, because it's about comfort for me.
I love this because it also makes me think about how many different kind of people you have to interact with, and in some ways see how you guys' personalities mesh. Like,
Yes.
how do you manage that? Especially, I'm thinking like being bilingual and like having a different understanding, a different culture to be a part of since you're based in Montreal. Like,
Hmm.
what are the differences there? Like, how do you manage, yeah, just like balancing that?
I think I think being bilingual in Montreal has helped me a lot just because there are people that come from so many different cultures and because it's Montreal is a French city, I have to say it, but very many people speak English. And so I find that my personality sort of changes sometimes based on the language that I'm speaking. I show up differently in that way. And I also want people to understand that I'm here to capture their moment. I'm not, this is, the shoot is not about me. And so I think that I'm navigating in my mind what language, what way to show up so that the people can be themselves in front of me. And it's interesting because I think the language does matter sometimes in the way that you're able to interact with people.
Yeah, yeah. I was thinking that way too.
Yeah.
I'm not bilingual, but I do feel like how you said, you have a bit of a different personality depending on what language you're speaking, which means
Mm-hmm.
constantly holding like all these different cultures. And
Yes.
yeah, it's really interesting to hear your perspective on like how you can approach that when you're in like a service provider and client kind of relationship.
Mm-hmm. And I think also, like, let's say there's the one where you can see those sort of paint,
Mm,
the drawing, yeah. So that was for La Presse, which is a Quebec newspaper. And so I was asked to go into, this beautiful Berry Rouge studio, and he was so generous. And I think I realized in that moment that you don't have to do much. People want to show you themselves, and it's just about trying to figure out what's the angle that best shows, their work, their personality, their environment. And he was so generous. He was so wonderful. I think that again, it was, one of the shoes that really stuck with me because I had an opportunity to shoot him several times on different occasions. and this was, a visit of his studio, and he just laid everything open for me.
Yeah.
And it was such a wonderful moment spent with him because, again, he got to be himself, and I just got to hang out and be there and let him be who he wanted to be. And I was able to just capture that.
Oh my gosh, some like studio shoots are always some of my favorite shoots. I in particular love photographing other creative people.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
because like how you say it, like they're just being themselves and within that I'm just being myself because I get to photograph you doing it and
Yeah.
it's always a good time to me.
Yeah.
Um, that has me thinking about like the balance between personal work and commissioned work.
Yes.
And how do you carve out time? I don't know if, well, this is under your commission tab, so this is
Yeah.
clearly commission. Like thinking about if it was just like a friend you went to photograph them, how do you carve out time for personal work, when you have like all these commission pieces coming in?
I think that it's really important to be able to do your own work because people used to tell me that before I had editors reach out to me, and I found it to be true. People reach out to you based on the personal work that you make. And so it's very important for you to think back to, okay, when's the last time I shot for myself? And if it's been more than, I don't know, a couple months, get to it. And because because people want to people want to see who you are. That's what's really important. They don't want to know what you would be doing if they paid you. They want you to know, hey, what do you like to do? What kind of lighting do you like? What kind of interactions do you like having with people? So in this story, it was about this city outside of Montreal where, a lot of the Black residents felt discriminated against. And so the paper had me, sit with them and tell their story about, when they were arrested for no reason, when they felt that, they were being harassed by the police. And it was it spoke to me so much because, one, I know what it could be like.
Yeah.
And they were so, again, generous with their time, telling me their story. And it felt so important that I was able to do that. And for me, having, like, for example, having him look like the master of his domain, to be able to say that, despite the fact that I get harassed constantly, this is still my home
Yeah.
and I will look proud and amazing, felt like, yeah, this is a win. This is what I want the reader to be able to catch, that despite the fact that he's being harassed, they haven't touched his spirit. He still remains who he is. And I think that even though it's commission work, it still felt very personal. And
Hmm.
sometimes when you're lucky, you're able to combine commissioned work with your personal work
Yeah.
because it speaks to you so much. And so sometimes you're shooting for other people, but sometimes at the end of the shoot, maybe you could take a risk and say, hey, you know what? Do you mind? I think I've covered all the shoots that I wanted, but maybe if you can stay another 5-10 minutes, maybe we could do a few things. And more often than not, people are open to it because they've probably enjoyed the work that you did together for the last bit. And maybe, they don't mind staying a little bit longer for you.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're able to combine the two.
This just has me thinking about like, like sometimes you're shooting, especially as a documentary photographer,
Hmm.
you're shooting really like sensitive subject matter.
Yeah.
Um, do you ever feel like you need to take time for like away from yourself, not from yourself, excuse me, for yourself, when working on things like that? Or like, how do you manage your mental health when you are
Um,
covering something like this?
that's a good question. I haven't felt the need just
Okay.
because I'm not covering I haven't had to cover very, very hard things, but the paper was very good about letting me know that if I needed that time, that they could provide it for me, that if I needed to step away, I could do that. The only thing with documentary work is that, I don't know if you follow, there's a website called Instagram site called A Photo Editor. And
No.
recently they were talking a little bit about what it's like to be a documentary photographer, doing work for the newsroom, and how sometimes if you step away for too long, they won't call you back. That
Mhm.
you're sort of at the mercy because you always have to say yes. That it's a very precarious, or can be a very precarious job, especially when you're a freelancer as opposed to a staff photographer. And so you don't necessarily have the luxury of stepping away. And
Right.
so people will work injured, they will work when they're sad, they will work, when their mental health is not great, just because, you never know when they're going to call you again. And you're always sort of pushing yourself because you want to do an amazing job, because if it's the first time they called you, you want to make sure that they call you back. And again, if you're not available, well, it'll be the next person on the list. And so you might lose that opportunity. I think that that's more stressful, I think, as
Mhm.
a documentary photojournalist, more than anything else that I think I've had to cover. I think it's the stress of being able to show up as your best self every single time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so real. Yeah. Because I mean, even thinking about the last project that I was just sharing on the screen, where it's like you said yourself, like, I can relate. I know what this feels
Hmm.
like, but it is much harder to have to show up and be depressed, not be in your right state of
Yeah.
mind, not feel
Yeah.
equipped, based on your own experiences. And that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Um, But thinking about, working for these publications
Hmm.
and working with editors, I'm wondering how you nurture those relationships with editors
Mm.
getting assignments. It's like, okay, I got it. I'm in, and maybe they do like the work. How do
Hmm.
you keep your name at the top of the list?
Sometimes you have to call them, or you send that quick email. I've been known to, at the end of the year, send a card to say, hey, this year was great. I really appreciated working with you. Or I'll send an email and say, hey, if you have anything coming up, don't hesitate to call on me. I think it's important to reach out to people, even if you don't need the work, just so that they remember you. And I think it's a nice gesture also to just say hi. Um, and that's a way of keeping them interested in your work. And
Yeah.
also pitch. Pitching is extremely important. Again, you have to get used to hearing the word no. Sometimes you'll pitch 5 stories and only one will stick. Well, you know what? You got that one.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit more about that actually, like your approach in pitching?
Mhm.
Would you pitch 5 stories back to back in the same email? Like, how do you
No,
formulate?
I only like to pitch one story at a time. And I'll get the email of the editor and send it out. And I can pitch several publications the same story, just because you don't know who's going to be a taker. But once somebody tells you they're interested, that's when you sort of have to let the other ones know, hey, you know what? Um, I'm going to be doing this story for such and such, but I have different stories that I would like to approach you with. And so I think that doing a lot of pitches is extremely important.
Mhm.
Considered ones, I think you really have to think back, okay, who is the publication? What have they published before? You don't want to pitch them on a story they published last week, right? They want to have a sense that you know who they are, what their brand is, but do not hesitate to pitch. And you can do it several times a week. Do not hesitate, because if you're not the one pitching, somebody else is.
Okay, so thinking about that, say you've pitched 5 different publications for a
Mhm.
story and somebody picked up one of the pitches, right? And you're
Yeah.
like, "Okay, cool." In that cycle, you'd reach out to the other 4 and be like, "Hey, somebody else picked this up, but I
Yeah.
have," and then you just keep doing that until you can.
Absolutely. 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 I hate to say it that way, but it's kind of a numbers game in a way, just because you're not guaranteed that the 5 that you pitch are going to take it, but you actually have to pitch all 5, just because you don't know who's going to go with your story. And the other ones, it reminds the other people that you're still out there, you're still doing good work, and don't hesitate, to share a picture or two to say, hey, this is kind of what I'm doing right now. Um, I think somebody, I think it was Dana that said it before, being on Instagram is important. Keeping your some sort of presence on Instagram is important because people who are looking for photographers are on Instagram,
Yeah.
right? Until we develop another kind of platform for people, I think that's where you need to be exhibiting your work. And so you need to be on Instagram, making sure that your work is there and making sure that you're reaching out to publishers. Do not do it via Instagram. They do not like that,
Mm.
but look for the email and make sure to send out those emails.
That's kind of right on par with a question that we have in the chat right now from Gina, who says, how do you connect to an editor? And you
Mm-hmm.
don't do it on Instagram, try to find their contact elsewhere.
Yeah, you really do, because I think that even though they're sort of working on it while on Instagram, I think that it's sort of their personal account. I don't think that most don't like to mix. So look for the email. Sometimes you have to guess, honestly. Sometimes I'm just like, trying to say, is it the first letter and then the rest of the name? And so if you're not sure, you can send it out. It'll come back if it's the wrong address anyways.
Right.
Uh, or, sometimes you can talk to somebody else and say, hey, do you have somebody's email? Sometimes people will help you with that. But again, send an email, a considered pitch. You think about the publication you're reaching out to, tell them exactly what you want to be doing, and see how it goes. I think it's so, 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 so important.
Yeah. I want to get to another question in the chat from Marion, who
Mhm.
says, just wondering how involved Karene is with the editing process of her photographs, whether she enjoys that side of it or not.
Oh my God.
I think we might be on the same page sometimes.
Okay, so I edit all my pictures. I, to be honest, it's funny because sometimes I love it. At night when I'm sort of playing around, I love it. And some days when it's huge, I'm like, oh my God, where am I going to start? Because I find that it is so
Oh
it can be, somebody said it earlier. Dana was saying it, you can work on the same, oh no, it was you that was saying that before to Dana. You can work on the same picture like for months, and sort of never be satisfied. But sometimes the beauty is when you're doing, documentary or you're doing photojournalism, you cannot edit the picture too much anyway. So that kind of, you're kind of spared that. But when
my God.
you're doing more intimate stuff, you could be on the same picture. You can work on it and create 10 versions and still be wondering, is this the one?
Yeah. Right.
Is is that the highlight color that I wanted to do? And so I was reacting that way because sometimes I hate it, but sometimes when it comes out and it's exactly what you wanted, it's like the best feeling in the world.
Is so good. And it makes all of those, I don't know how you label yours, but sometimes I'm like, like red shot alt and then alt two, alt three, alt four. And once you finally get down to the thing that feels like it resonates the most to you, you're like, yes, it's being
Yes.
received how I hoped. Like this is the vision that I had. And it always feels really good to me.
Exactly. Exactly. I think that it's the only thing I'll be honest, what I find most difficult, I find is I'm not good with naming my document management in Lightroom. I think is probably the thing that I struggle with the most. How to uh create my folders, make sure they're not taking too much space on my computer, that sort of thing. I think, you know, if there was like a tutorial on that, I would take it because that's the hardest part for me. Uh, but the editing itself can be fun. It can be stressful but fun at the same time.
Beautiful. Gina says, thank you, following you now and love your work.
Thank you.
Um,
Oh,
and
can we show, there's a series that we didn't talk about and I love it so much and it's so important to me. If we could,
absolutely.
yeah,
Is it in the commissions?
it's in the projects
Okay.
and it's the greener dress or the cousins. Top. Yeah, the
Gotcha.
green dress.
Oh, I
And
love
this is I think one of the things I love most. And so I'm going to be showing that in September
it.
at
Ooh,
a
please
local.
drop. Let us know where.
Yes, I'll send you more information.
Okay.
And that one, okay, so it's very special to me because I was at a thrift store, I found this dress, and the dress was um basically made in Canada the same year that my mom was born in Haiti. And what I loved about it so much was that she could never have guessed that she would move here. And that dress is in perfect condition. And so whomever had that dress must have loved it because again, it was perfect. And now it's in my family. And I thought to myself, how about if I shot my daughter and my mom wearing the same dress?
Yeah.
And it's just so, it feels so special to me just because um it's kind of a link to where we are now. And to feel like it's going to be in my family now also feels kind of special.
Yeah.
And I love that dress. And I love that I was able to capture my mom and my daughter in it too.
These are gorgeous. And I also really love when I get to work with my family too.
Mm,
I can capture them so beautifully and so softly. Like, I love when images make me feel like I'm right there with them.
yeah,
And that's how
thank
I
you.
feel and about these photos. They're just so soft and delicate. It makes me feel like I'm just sitting right there in the room with them.
Thank you. I love them in it.
Yeah.
That one and the one last
Yeah,
it's
please.
again in projects, and I think it's the cousins. And that one I took, so not the year of the pandemic, the following one. And it's basically my niece and my daughter. And there was something about their link because they were 10 and 14 at the time, and they were just like two peas in a pod, always together. And I thought, I should do images to capture just how beautiful their connection is and speak to how I don't know how it was with your cousins, but my cousins were and I were so close growing up, and my
Yeah.
house was their house and their house was my house. And I thought I would love to be able to show people what it's like to have family that are so meaningful to us and who kind of help us to grow into who we are, right? Because there's a 4-year difference, and one's looking at the other one like, oh my God, you're the smartest, most amazing person that I know. And speaking deep into the night. And I thought I want to be able to capture that.
And I think you did so well. I mean, that's definitely one of my favorite parts
Thank
about
you.
having cousins is
Yeah.
I definitely have two cousins in particular that I feel like they're my sisters. I call them my sisters all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
there's a particular special kind of relationship that you have with a cousin, and it's
Yes.
so cool to see because it's always also like an age gap. Like y'all aren't usually the same age. It's like
No,
I probably wouldn't be hanging out with you if you weren't my cousin, but we do this
exactly.
all the time. We're coming down to the end, but before we go, I really wanted to get this question in from Anonymous who says, how do you approach galleries about showing your work since you said you'll be showing in September?
Yes.
What's that process like? How do you get something like that?
You know what? It's really about bringing your portfolio, asking for an appointment, and sitting down with people and saying, you know what? This is what I'm working on. This is who I am. And I'd really love to work with you. And understanding that not every gallery is going to be the gallery for you, right? I think that you really have to understand what they're showing and understand whether your work actually fits with their style, because every gallery has a particularity, they have a style, they have an ethos. And I think that your work has to make sure that it connects with them when you go into show, because there's nothing worse than showing up to a gallery and realizing they're not, our work, they're never going to pick me because my work doesn't speak to them, right? But when you find a gallery that does, go ahead. And you know what? Maybe they'll say we're full this year. And so you come back and next year and you make a point to go back, right?
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to go up to those galleries and say, hey, this is who I am, this is what I do, and I'd love to show here.
So would you also suggest then that like maybe you send a cold email and you show up in person to just
Yeah,
like keep trying to get your name out there?
absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Again, it's about understanding that rejection is part of the game and that it's okay, but doing it anyways.
Yeah. Also that last photo, That is just so romantic and soft. I love that photo so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This conversation has been so beautiful. I'm so grateful to get to talk to you. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise with us. There were more questions that we couldn't get to, and I'm so sorry because it just felt like I was really just so deep in conversation with you that like I was so focused on some details. So I'm sorry about that, but I feel like we still gained so much.
It was wonderful. Thank you for having me. And I'm so glad that I got to speak to you. And if my words resonated with anybody at all, thank you. If you want to reach out to me on Instagram, I'm open to it as well, because people helped me. And if I can help anybody, then it's my pleasure to do so.
Yes, please. And if you missed that, we actually dropped Corinne's handle in the chat. So please go to her page, give her a follow, and reach out. Yes, thank y'all so much for tuning in yet again. We have our next session coming in 30 minutes. So please come back. We want to shout out to our sponsors, Adobe Photoshop Lightroom, because we're having a giveaway where if you use the hashtag BWP Summit and just let us know how this experience is going for you, how much you love this conversation and others, you could win 1 year free Adobe photography plan. And we want you to win that. So please go share about it on Twitter and Instagram, tag us, let us know. And we'll see you soon. So bye. Oh, wait, before we go, can I take a screenshot?
Of course.
Oh, and perfect. Thank you so much, Corinne. We'll see you soon.
Yes. Bye.